WLTV, the number one wine show on the internet. And this is BBQ Central.
Start the game! Let's go!
We'll do it live. Okay. Well, do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
So to get that perfect barbecue, you use wood. Are you sure it's safe? Whatever. We put the lighter fluid on, strike the match, and... Oh, should we call the fire department? That might be a good idea.
Welcome to the Really Big Barbecue Central Show, a show that talks about all things important to the world of barbecue and grilling. Originating from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame city of Cleveland, Ohio, the barbecue capital of the North Coast. I, by the way, am your program host, Greg Rempe. Happy to have you aboard. If you have been looking at getting in on the show, last week was probably better. But we can mix in a call or an email this week as well if you're so inclined to do that. Here are your 2 bits of contact information.
You can get in touch with the show by calling 216-220-0966. Email Greg at the bbqcentralshow.com. On the Twitter and Instagrams at BBQ Central Show.
Anything else you want to find out about the show can be found at the main website, thebbqcentralshow.com. And here's what's happening on the show this evening. Coming up in about 12 minutes from now, a first-timer to the show. From time to time, I'm not going to say we're way outside the box on this segment coming up, but we're a little bit outside of the box because the main operation isn't typically the talk that we have here on this show, but I was forwarded a link by friend of show, Jason Kaplan, and he said, hey, I just checked this video out. You may or may not have an interest in it. He found it to be fairly engaging, so I watched it. And by the end, I was completely hooked enough to where I sought out the website, got the contact information, sent the initial email asking if they had any interest in coming on the show to talk about the biz and what they do and all that good stuff. And ultimately, a month or so or 2 down the road, maybe it's been longer than that, but certainly from all points going to be worth the wait. I will be talking with the owner of Broken Arrow Ranch and first-timer to the show, Chris Hughes. And if you aren't familiar with Chris Hughes and what Broken Arrow Ranch does, a multitude of different things, but the mainstay of the business is hunting wild game in the Texas region, specifically venison and boar, I believe. But then there's also a retail side and how they actually accomplish the operation itself when you watch it on the video, and as Chris will tell us here this evening. Very cool. Had no idea that this kind of a business was out here. So Chris will be on to talk about it in 11 minutes from now. Then 35 past the hour, we are rejoined by what many consider to be America's Butcher, the CEO of LaFrida Meat Purveyor. Pat LaFrida joins me. And if you keep an eye on this industry and as you follow this show, you know we have from time to time talked about plant-based meat, specifically burgers. I don't know. Maybe there has been a plant-based steak here or there, but not to any amount that I have seen. But specifically plant-based burgers that I've seen. Impossible Burger comes to mind, Beyond Burger. I think those are probably the 2 heavyweights of the industry at this point on menus, not only fast food chains, but in very respectable restaurants. B-Spot Burgers, TGI Fridays, the list goes on. I was interested because Pat was making the rounds recently on a number of news cable channels talking about the plant-based boom and what his thoughts are, and I wanted to get my own interview with Pat on that portion of the industry because we do cover it, but we haven't had a huge number of intricate thoughts, and especially I think Pat brings a unique perspective because, and if you have missed his previous interviews on some of those news programs, I believe by all accounts a very pro plant-based meat guy. And I thought he brings a unique perspective because, as everybody knows, he's steeped in beef, right? I mean, he's up to his elbows in beef every day. Everybody that works at La Frida Meat is up to their elbows and perhaps clavicles in meat. And this would be a direct competitor potentially or an option aside from what they sell. So asked Pat to come on. He said he was absolutely available and would like to come on to talk about that a little bit more in depth with me here on this show, and that's what we're going to do 35 past. Yeah, we're talking a little bit about La Frida Home as well, some of the stuff that's happening there for the home consumer. A lot of you were asking about briskets. If time allows, I'll ask him about that, especially left and right side briskets. I saw that conversation spark up here a little bit ago. So that wraps your first hour. Then we'll get into the second hour. I'm not usually a top-of-the-hour guest guy, but if you listened to the show last week, you know I mentioned her by name as we were in the middle of my conversation with Robin Lindars during her 2-segment poll last week, and that was the winner of the very first Steak Cook-Off Association event in Hartville, Ohio, going on about 2 weeks ago. That is 17-year-old Angel Todd, and she will be my top-of-the-second-hour guest. So given the fact that this is also the fourth Tuesday of the month, and that always brings a visit from the panel called the Embedded Correspondents, Steve Ray, Doug Scheiding, David Huff, John Solberg, Michigan, Texas, Tennessee, and Oklahoma, not necessarily respectively, but that's where they all live in some form or fashion. We might eat into a little bit of the EC segment on the front side of that as we wrap up and make sure that we give proper time and allow proper conversation with Angel Todd at the top of the second hour. And then we'll get into Embedded Correspondence. We have a good 3-4 items that we're going to be covering, not the least of which is catering, and specifically how you go about charging your catering. I have always worked off of a specific formula. That formula put to the test literally hours ago as I came off a price for a family member, and the discounted price seemed to be shocking to them, and not in a good way, I might add. So I said, hey, this would make a great conversation piece as we start off the Embedded Correspondence segment, because a lot of these guys do some type of catering or have catered in the past. So we'll see what the thought process is there, and then we'll build in, of course, everybody waiting for what? Cat poems that will be delivered by the Embedded Correspondence. So there you have it. We have Chris Hughes and Pat LaFrida first hour, Angel Todd top of the second hour, Embedded Correspondence running out the duration of the show after that, 216-220-0966. Don't forget, you can follow me socially. Do that on Instagram and Twitter at BBQ Central Show. Also, give me a follow over on Facebook /BBQ Central Show. By the way, I've had a number of friend requests on my personal page. And I would just like to say this, and I say this with peace and love, peace and love. If you ask me for a friend request on my personal Facebook page, don't be alarmed if I never get to it or I never accept it. It's not because I don't like you or anything like that. Nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that if I wasn't doing this show, I would not have any social media. Not because I'm a curmudgeonly old middle-aged man or anything like that. No. I just don't think that anybody has any interest in hearing where I'm going or what I'm eating or what I'm doing outside of the show. That's the only reason. And, of course, as you know, Facebook doesn't allow you to have a fan page or a show page without having a personal account because they hold you hostage. Otherwise, I would just ditch the personal account altogether. So if you've asked me for friendship on my personal page, I'm saying again with peace and love, I'm not accepting it. Just go like the Barbecue Central page because I don't do anything over on my personal page. I don't do anything over there. Nor do I want to do anything over there. I want to remain as much off the grid as possible while remaining as much on the grid as possible. Why? Because I am hypocrite. Number one, hypocrite. That's what I like. I like living and vacillating in the world of hypocrisy. It's my favorite thing. As I had mentioned last week, top of the second hour, well, first interview segment in the second hour. My oldest daughter, Bobby, was in, and she read a handful of poems. Cats, 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 and more cats. And let me say this, with the feedback that I had gotten through the course of the week, I had no idea how many of you were actually cat folk, like pro-cat. I also had no idea how many of you are not cat folks, anti-cat, against the cat. Cats are arrogant, cats hate their owners, cats don't care about anybody, blah, blah. Likewise, or on the other side of the fence, cats are great, cats are self-sufficient, they sit on your lap and they purr. I continue to be an indifferent cat person. I am a indifferent cat owner. If I never had cats, I never wanted cats. If I never had cats again, I would not miss cats. But I'm not going out of my way to open up the door and let them run out at the same time. Regardless of what people think, I'm not that kind of a cat owner either. Smokin' Joe's Pit Barbecue against cats. All right. Chris Hughes coming up out of the break. I will talk to you quickly about the Barbecue Guru. By the way, if you are in the instant chat in YouTube and you want to share your favorite cat poem, let it loose. It may get read on the air at random. The Barbecue Guru believes that outdoor cooking should be fun and easy because it can be with their automatic pit temperature control devices. If you have a Weber Smoky Mountain or some type of ceramic cooker or even a decent-sized offset pit, this might be for you. If you don't want to contend with fire, if you don't want to learn fire management, or you just want to make it as efficient as possible, then you might want to look at the Barbecue Guru. They have these devices that will attach to your cooker of choice. And depending on what level of technology you get or what pit controller you get, you have a bunch of different options as far as the tech is concerned. But in its simplest form, set a temperature and let the Guru do its thing. It will maintain that pit temperature you set it at. No problem whatsoever. Just make sure that it has enough fuel in it to keep it going. If you want to ramp it up or ramp it down, you can certainly do that by simply adjusting the temperature. No damper adjustments on the top or the bottom. No pinwheel dampers on the offsets, nothing like that. Just hook it up and away you go. Then put the pit temperature probe in the cooking chamber where you want that temperature to be set at, and then it's magic. It just works. You visit the website, bbqguru.com. That's bbqguru.com, and get started on your guru journey today. If you have any questions, call them 800-288-GURU. That's 800-288-GURU. The Barbecue Guru continues to be a breakthrough in barbecue technology. Don't forget to check out their accessories as well, like the rib ring, which is becoming a very hot seller. Sold out the very first run. They are now back in stock, so if you're looking for a way to double your rib capacity on a ceramic cooker, the rib ring is something that you're going to want to take a look at. Don't forget the monolith grill, number of different accessories to make your barbecue and grilling life easier. bbqguru.com. That's bbqguru.com. Broken Arrow Ranch coming up. Stick around. Be right back.
Broadcasting live from the Barbecue Central Show studios in Cleveland, Ohio. You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
And this portion of the show being brought to you by Butcher Barbecue, makers of award-winning injections, marinades, rubs, seasonings, barbecue sauces, grilling oils, all of Butcher Barbecue products tested on the competition circuit, as well as in backyards worldwide. Be the pitmaster of your neighborhood and visit butcherbbq.com to stock up right now. That's butcherbbq.com. Always trust your butcher. All right, leading off the show tonight, someone who has a very unique business. I was sent a video, as I said earlier, from my pal Jason, who was intrigued to buy it. And after watching the video, I was hooked and had to have him on to talk about it. You'll be especially interested if you like deer or other wild game, and you might get some cooking tips too. So let's head to the Fogo Charcoal Hotline and welcome first-timer to the show, the owner of Broken Arrow Ranch, Chris Hughes, joining me on the show. Chris, how are you, buddy?
Doing great, Greg. How are you?
I'm absolutely fabulous, Chris. Appreciate you making time this evening. And I guess before we get into the nuts and bolts of Broken Arrow Ranch and what you do, maybe a quick background about yourself, where you're from originally, and if you are a fan of live fire cooking.
Sure. So, Chris Hughes, Broken Arrow Ranch, born, raised Ingram, Texas. It's Central Texas in the Texas Hill Country. And Broken Arrow Ranch is a purveyor of wild game meats. So what makes us pretty unique is that we go to ranches around the state here that have an overpopulation of deer and antelope, and we harvest those animals directly in the field. We take a shooter, a skinner, a mobile meat processing unit, and a government meat inspector. Go out there, we cull the herds for these ranchers, pay the ranchers for the animals that we harvest, process the meat, package it, and ship it nationwide.
So that's it from a very high level. From a history standpoint, 1983, I believe it was your dad that kind of started Broken Arrow, or whatever it was previous to maybe getting its name. But was that his whole mission to get it started, was to help kind of thin the herd, if you will?
Right. So the vision was that there's a lot of non-native deer and antelope that were released here in Texas in the 1930s, and the populations boomed. And there was a fear that these non-native deer and antelope were going to outcompete the native whitetail deer for food. So there was a concern of trying to keep the population in check. At the same time, he had seen that venison was a popular menu item all over the world, but it was pretty much non-existent here in the United States at that time. And there was really no domestic source for that venison. So he kind of saw an opportunity there. He saw a potential supply and put two and two together.
So as the business starts to grow, are you hunting the wild game, if you will, and then taking it around to restaurants first, or was there also a built-in end-user want for the meat as well?
Well, it certainly took some convincing. There were a lot of chefs. Our primary targets, certainly to start off with, were fine dining restaurants, because that's where venison was being used most often on a wholesale perspective. But he was basically just loading up a cooler with a whole deer leg in it and trying to knock on some chefs' doors and convince them it was something that they wanted to buy.
I can't sit here and think off the top of my head that all these fine dining restaurants, that venison is something that was sought after. Is that something that popularity has ebbed and flowed over the years and decades?
I kind of joke that venison's been a fad for 15,000 years. It's
right.
It's been around a long time, and I don't think it's going anywhere. But from a historical perspective, venison's always been on the table. It was King's Fare. I tended to joke that it was the rich man's fair and the poor man's fair, because it was the fine dining restaurants and it was in the backwoods, but it was the middle class that I think has missed out on it historically and is now getting more and more familiar with wild game meats, both in use in hunting as well as in their restaurants. But it had a seasonality to it. It was always from a European chef training. It was always a fall and winter menu item, and that trend has broken a lot within the last 10 years or so, and you're seeing it on menus year-round now.
Chris Hughes joining me here on the show, owner of Broken Arrow Ranch, the website brokenarrowranch.com, if you want to check it out while we're talking here. I'm only exposed to venison from the people that I know that will go out during deer hunting season and try and get a buck or two or three or whatever the catch is that they can make. Is what you're doing any different than what a hunting deer season would do?
There are some differences that allow us to sell the meat, but in its essence, no. What we're doing is we go out to this ranch. We're seeking animals. We're shooting them. All the animals are harvested with a headshot at distances from 50 to 200 yards typically. So it's a very stress-free harvest that's on these animals. But it is hunting. In that sense, where it starts to differentiate itself is that we're not just trying to get one animal. We're trying to get 10, 15, 40 animals, on a harvest. We have a government meat inspector that's out there present with us, watching the whole thing, and that's what allows us to be able to sell the meat, along with the mobile processing unit that is really it's an inspected meat plant on wheels. So those are the key differences and key things that allow us to sell this meat.
Yeah, so I want to dig into those three items here just a little bit. Are you approaching ranchers, or do they, I would imagine at this point you guys also have a pretty established name in what you do out there, so ranchers that are prospectively interested would say, hey, Chris, I have X hundred amount of acres and I'm getting a little overrun, or what is your process to make sure that my land management is kept in the right direction?
Right, it's a little bit of both. Over the years, we've developed a Rolodex of ranchers that we keep in touch with, but at the same time, we don't know them all, and a lot of them do a very good job of keeping their information private. So when they talk to their neighbors or they have this need and they're talking to a wildlife biologist, our name does come up. So sometimes we're contacting ranchers, seeing if they have a need for us, and sometimes they're contacting us and saying that they need to reduce their populations.
And in the end, as you'd said, you are paying the rancher for whatever the cull take is for you. What's the going rate for your services?
So the one of the things that I think has made this business successful over the years is recognizing that these animals do have value. Certainly early on, there was not a lot of outlets for these animals with the rancher. But Dad paid them. They would call us and say, how much does it cost you to come out and get rid of these animals? And he said, well, let me tell you the good part. We're going to pay you. And I think that's part of what's made us successful. For us, the rate, it depends on the species. We typically pay per pound. One of our most popular animals is the deer in the area, the axis deer. Mm-hmm. And we're currently paying $2 a pound or $3 a pound on those right now. So you wind up with about $150 to $200 per head on that animal. And it's fairly comparable with what these ranchers can get by trapping these animals live and selling them to other ranchers. Where it breaks away is on the trophy bucks. Those are worth a lot more money. But for us, you can't eat the antlers. So people like us, because we can go through, can be very surgical on how we do the harvest. We can leave those trophy bucks for breeding on their land or for other purposes, while we're targeting specific coal animals, coal bucks, those things like that.
So are you looking for ones that might be a little less robust, or I don't want to say sickly by any stretch, but ones that might be behind the pack and that would just be eliminated by one way or the other?
Yeah, not as much looking for the sickly ones. It's and really one of the things about this process is that if an animal is sick or ill, typically they lie down and they don't even present themselves to us for harvest. So we're really looking at the healthy animals. Where we would be targeting is really what the rancher wants to target, but those would be females. So you're looking at healthy does and bucks that maybe their antlers aren't quite as large as the one standing next to them, or aren't quite meeting the criteria that the rancher wants. And so those are the ones that would be called young bucks and does.
Chris Hughes joining me here on the show from Broken Arrow Ranch. All right, Chris, so let's talk about that mobile processing unit. I don't know how many of my listeners have actually been in any kind of meat processing facility, to include myself. So the the trailer or the unit that you have that I saw in the video prior to me contacting you was very impressive. So what does it entail? And then we can also talk about the meat inspector here in a minute.
Sure. So, in order to sell meat, there's rules and regulations, and they're very specific on what's required. One of the beefs I've actually have with the food inspection industry or food inspection laws is that they're all process based instead of results based, meaning that they give you very specific things that you have to do, and then they think that the meat's going to be safe on the back end. But that worked to our advantage a little bit because they were very specific on what was required for a meat processing plant. You had to have walls that were impermeable to water, can be cleaned and sanitized. You had to have hot water. You had to have the refrigeration, all these different kind of rules and specifications. So what my dad was able to do was take all of those specifications, put them on the back of a trailer, and then when he submitted it for getting a grant of inspection, meaning that it would be improved, they came up and they said, "Well, we can't do this. This is on a trailer." And he said, "Well, there's nothing in the rule books that says it can't be on a trailer. You just says I've got to have this, that, and the other thing, and I've got every single one of them." So they couldn't find anything that would disqualify it. So they approved the trailer, and that's how the whole thing works.
So having the USDA inspector on site, is that a cost that you incur to some degree, or is it highly subsidized by the government in order to have somebody on there? I know I have a whole different diatribe that I'm not even going to get on tonight about horse meat and stuff and USDA inspectors or the lack of subsidizing for that. But what about for you? Is that something that would be akin to like a beef inspector?
Right. So it's the same meat inspector, same people. They would be inspecting our process one day and could go down the road and be inspecting a poultry plant or another slaughterhouse, that's in our area. One distinction though, without getting too far in the weeds on the meat regulations, we actually work, and our meat inspector is a Texas Department of Agriculture inspector, not a USDA inspector. Okay. And just long story short, when the Federal Meat Inspection Act was written in 1900, they again were very specific about what they defined as meat. They listed beef and they listed pork and lamb and goat, but they did not list the original red meat of venison. So it wound up not falling under USDA jurisdiction, but because it's inspected by a Texas Department of Ag, we can ship it across state lines and sell it all over the country. So again, it's a little bit of a maze in the meat inspection world, but in terms of our cost, part of that is the mission of the Texas Department of Agriculture. So we don't pay for the first 8 hours, but we do pay for any overtime that gets incurred.
From a grading standpoint, you look at the beef industry right now, and I don't think it's ever been more popular than it is today. You have all these choices that folks weren't really hip to even 5, 6, 7 years ago. A lot of prime now. You have a lot of Wagyu. Japanese stuff is getting flown in here. Do you have similar grading for like deer or not so much?
No, there's no specific grading from like there would be with prime and choice and select. I guess we could argue that it's all prime,
right? Of course,
at least from our perspective. But we've built our brand on quality, and we stand behind the quality of our products, and so. And we've developed a very good reputation of that quality. So we put it out, and we've had very, very few complaints on the quality of the meat since 1983. So we've been at it a long time.
So let's talk about venison steaks, or maybe whatever your favorite part of the deer is. What's the best way to cook it, or how do you like to cook it?
Sure. So you asked earlier about live fire. I love live fire cooking. I think that's an excellent way. It gives it a little hint of smoke. You can You can really control the heat. One of the challenges is controlling the heat with live fire, but if you build your fire right or have your grill where it can raise up and down and move side to side, then you can certainly control that heat. For me, everybody thinks that there's only the backstrap that comes on a deer, and it's certainly a prime cut. It's a very nice cut. But one of the things that we really enjoy are the leg steaks, the leg fillets. And what we'll do is we'll take the whole leg, we'll age it for about five days or so, dry age, and then we'll vacuum seal it and we'll let it wet age for up to 28 days, 28 to 30 days, and then at that point we bone it out. But you're letting those enzymes kind of break everything down, tenderize the meat, let some flavor develop. And then once you bone it out and clean it up, you've got a beautiful, beautiful venison steak. And it's got a lot of flavor. Part of the more a muscle works, the more flavor it's going to develop. And the less the muscle works, the less flavor it has. So the loin is very, very tender, but it doesn't have a lot of flavor to it. On the flip side, the shanks have a tremendous amount of flavor, but they're very, very tough, and they need to be braised to kind of break down all that connective tissue. Those leg steaks are just right in that sweet spot, right in the middle, where they have, the tenderness of a loin, but a little bit more flavor development. And then for my money, I'd like to cook it simply. I typically go with venison so lean, it really needs some kind of oil or fat around it to help protect it while it cooks. That's why a lot of people wrap it in bacon. But again, I think then your meat just tastes like bacon. So I'll typically rub it with some oil. Pretty heavy on the salt because it's very, very lean. It doesn't have that fat to carry the flavor, so it really needs a large dose of salt. Cracked pepper, whatever herbs you have around, some rosemary, some garlic, you grill it up. And then usually some kind of sauce is a nice way to top it. That'll help bring some moisture if it gets overcooked. But it's also just kind of a nice kind of flavor component to the whole dish.
If you are interested in grabbing up some wild game meat, then head over to brokenarrowranch.com. That's brokenarrowranch.com. And we are talking with Chris Hughes, the owner of Broken Arrow Ranch. Chris, really appreciate the time tonight. Thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking me, and happy grilling out there, folks.
All right. Thanks again. There he is. Chris Hughes from Broken Arrow Ranch. So who's up? Who's going to be the first guy to brokenarrowranch.com, or gal, and grab up a venison steak or venison leg? How cool is that process? You kidding me? Mobile processing plant right there. Go onto your ranch, thin the herd, and they pay you for it. Nice. That's brokenarrowranch.com. They also have some sausages, some lamb stuff on there. They have some farm-raised venison as well, and was it pheasant? Pheasant? Hold on. What is it? Farm-raised the quail. That's right, not pheasant. Sorry. All right, attention, anyone who loves sausage and barbecue. That's all of us, right? Southside Market and Barbecue, established in 1882, and the oldest barbecue joint in Texas, owned by the same family for 3 generations, famous for the original beef sausage, coarse ground and a natural pork casing, and they're known for the authentic Central Texas barbecue like briskets and ribs, all meats including those briskets, slow smoked for many hours over real Texas post oak wood. They ship nationwide via the online store, southsidemarket.com. Shipping customers can choose to order now and ship later, include a custom gift note, and mail to multiple addresses without additional charges. All items are shipped sealed and in dry ice to ensure complete freshness upon arrival. All meats processed in the on-site USDA-inspected facility. On-site meat markets for fresh and smoked products. Custom orders welcome as well. 2 restaurants you can eat at: Elgin, Texas since 1882, and Bastrop, Texas since 2014. Grocery distribution through Texas and many surrounding states. Get 10% off your entire order online when you use coupon code BBQ Central. That's BBQ CENTRAL, all one word, lowercase, BBQ Central, 10% off every order from the first to the last at SouthsideMarket.com. And Pat LaFrida coming up after this. Stick around.
Continuing to produce incredibly mediocre content in an exceptionally professional way. You're listening and watching the Barbecue Central Show. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
Cookin' Pellets is sponsoring this segment, your number one source for quality wood pellets for all your pellet-driven cookers. You visit cookinpellets.com for all your information, flavors, and so forth. You can also order there. If you'd rather do it through Amazon.com, you can do it there as well. It's cookinpellets.com. All right, as I had mentioned in the open, the interest and visibility on plant-based meats continuing to gain momentum. So much so, you might have seen my next guest making the rounds on some of the news networks, talking about it on those. But let's dig into plant meat and meat and where they compare, if at all, obviously where they contrast. But more importantly, what does the future hold for plant-based meats? Let's hit the Fogo Charcoal Hotline and welcome back America's Butcher, and perhaps we can add him as another official Barbecue Central Show butcher. Racing to that hotline, we welcome back friend of the show, Pat LaFrida. Hey, Pat.
How are you, pal? How's it going?
I'm absolutely fabulous, Pat. Appreciate you making time for the show, as always. And, the show here, Pat, has steadily been tracking the plant-based meat niche for a few years now. And in the past, a non-meat option was a bean burger. The best bean burger, to me, is average at best. But there is a newer option out there right now that appears to look like meat and feel like meat, taste way more like meat than the bean burgers ever did. And there are a few big players in the sector pushing the weight around. So as someone who is known for meat and beef, what are your high-level thoughts as you see this plant-based movement continue to gain steam?
Well, I think that it's going to continue to gain steam, but I think they have the application completely wrong. So I have been sampling these products for a number of years, and we were the first meat company to endorse, at the time, Impossible Burger. Mm-hmm. And we've been switching over to Beyond Meat just because, we supply meat to restaurants, and it's not meat. It's the only non-meat item we distribute, but I think an alternative source of protein is important, because I think as the population grows and I think beef prices will continue to skyrocket, as we've seen with briskets skyrocket this season.
No doubt.
But we want to be able to control that somehow. And here's the problem. I don't know why they have marketed this product towards burgers. And I say that because I've eaten this product cooked by some of the best chefs in New York City. Mm-hmm. In other dishes. So when it's in another dish, especially David Chang made some of his famous beef infused dishes with this product, it was very difficult to tell that it wasn't actually meat. But when you put that much of it between two buns and something that's supposed to be America's comfort food, I just think that's a huge mistake on their part.
I guess from a raw or a mass form, Pat, how are you getting it from, a Beyond or an Impossible Burger? Is it just like a vat of what would look to be ground beef?
Impossible Burger was sending it to us initially in it only comes frozen, and it was coming in these 10-pound tubes. And now Beyond Meat and Impossible have been sending them in burger form. So in 6-ounce burgers or 5-ounce burgers, depending on what you order. So I almost preferred it when it was in those tubes so that a restaurateur could use it for other applications. I mean, they can still chop it up if it's in burger form, but they continue to market towards burgers. And hey, look, I will give them credit when it comes to, fast food restaurants have really jumped on that bandwagon quickly. I mean, White Castle, the fact that they took it nationally, but I think that could wind up to be a bad thing also, because the restaurants that would be normally interested in using a product like that, now the general public will see that they're using the same quality of product that White Castle is using, which for high-end restaurants can be an issue, right? I mean, they usually pride themselves on the best quality products available, and all of these products were super, super GMO products. And so initially you didn't see any of those claims because, I mean, they're completely genetically modified. So they've been able to skirt that in a way and get GMO certified, I should say non-GMO certified. But I still have some questions about that because I don't know how you could not modify it genetically and be able to pull protein out of the roots of these plants. But that's not my battle. My battle is right now it's been supply, and I have some serious concerns as to why these facilities that had too much product now don't have enough. I almost wonder if that isn't part of the marketing plan.
So you think maybe they do have reserve and they're trying to create a little bit of a clamor on product shortage, and then all of a sudden magically there's going to be more meat, and that potentially could cause a price spike. My words,
yes,
by the way.
Especially since Beyond Meat went public first. And then Impossible Burger stopped producing product because they had a recall. And the recall had to do with some plastic packaging that got chopped up and thrown into the product. But recalls like that are normally corrected quickly. So it's been a few months since we've had any Impossible Burger supply, causing all of those consumers to want Beyond Meat, kind of making that stock a little bit higher than it should be.
Like, what's the demand if people are calling the freedom? I mean, is there a definite demand for it? I mean, when we look at plant-based success, as you had mentioned, White Castle's on the deal now, Burger King, Carl's Jr., Red Robin. I mean, the list kind of goes on. Is it safe to say this is kind of past fad, and this is something that's going to have some staying power to a certain degree?
I think it will have some staying power, but I don't think it'll be in the burger realm. I think it'll be as an alternative meat source, where I think having alternative protein sources is a very good thing. Again, it will keep our beef prices in check. We'll always want to eat real beef. That's another thing that always got to me. I didn't understand why it needed to artificially bleed. If you're trying to eat something that's not meat, then why should it have to bleed this red dye or beet juice? It never made much sense for me. But I think that its legs will hold it in place for many years to come as an alternative meat source. And as I said, we do need to start to find alternatives. And protein has been huge, in huge demand, and we've seen that mostly in the pricing of veal, whereas veal has declined in use and in consumption, mostly because of its bad publicity that it has, and it's kind of not accurate. I mean, the calves are no longer enclosed and chained up and held in place. But we see it in the pricing of milk-fed veal because that milk is really the whey protein isolate that you see in protein drinks.
Mm-hmm.
So as protein drinks have become more and more popular, it has risen the price of whey protein, which was fed to calves, and that was the milk-fed formula fed to calves. So it's raised the price of veal. So that in itself shows you that there's been a demand for protein, and here is another great source for protein. I don't know why the fat content has to be as high as it is. I think that would be a great, and maybe they'll fix that. And I think that was a great selling point. It would have been a great selling point if it had less fat.
Yeah. It's not necessarily like a real healthy alternative if you're looking to get away from the beef.
No.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. That's why you'll see very few claims on the packaging because, they don't want anyone to rebuke that. But again, we're very open-minded and progressive meat purveyors, and it was something that we identified as an item of interest, and we were of the first to carry it in the Northeast. So we've been carrying it for a few years. I would say that the chefs that began with it don't even use it anymore. But again, with this recent lack of supply, and then the idea that Beyond Meat went public, which gave it a lot of publicity, there's been a huge demand for the product. And I don't think most of the public knows that this product's been available for a few years now. It's not very new. It's sat on retail shelves for a few years as well. So, it's a lot has to do with perception right now. I think it will. I think it will emerge to be a good meat alternative. Whether it's going to take over the burger realm, I think that's where it will fail eventually.
Yeah, that's a bet we're not going to go take the long odds on for sure, but could see in a different way in the kitchen. We're talking with Pat LaFrieda.
In a different application.
Yep.
Great.
Absolutely. Pat LaFrieda joining me here on the show. LaFrieda.com, the website, if you want to check it out. Pat, let's switch gears a little bit, talk about LaFrieda Home, which I'm guessing is a little bit more focused towards folks like me, homeowners or end users, consumers, I guess you could say. You guys really trying to make a push on that end?
Yes, our home delivery we started a few years ago, really just to combat the amount of phone calls that we were getting to the main office for home delivery. We started a site, and really it's grown organically. I don't know of any other company that doesn't stock pre-portioned meat. What we do is we get. So I don't know of another company waits for the delivery, the order to come in, then cuts the meat that night, and then overnights it the next day. So that's the service that we provide. So if you were to order something on LaFrieda.com on our home delivery page, those are the same steaks that some of the best restaurants in America are getting supplied with. We're cutting them the night that you order that product, and we're overnighting them the next day. So you'll get that product fresh. It's never been frozen. It comes with ice gel packs and an insulated cooler. And again, you open that. If you choose to freeze it, it's all vacuum packaged. So it would be good in your fridge for 3 or 4 weeks. But if you chose to freeze it, you could, and it would be good up to a year. But as I always suggest, if you're in a country in which you have the ability to buy fresh meat, I would never freeze anything unless I had bought something that I wasn't going to finish before it went bad. So, a lot of things go in your freezer, and we often speak about America wasting too much food. And I would love to know the number as a percentage of the amount of food we put in our freezer that really never comes out. It goes in, it stays in there for about a year and then gets tossed. But having a source to, freshly cut, dry-aged steaks to burgers, to you name it, we offer it on our home delivery site, and it's something that's really grown over the last couple of years.
Obviously, dealing with this show, Pat, there's a lot of interest because it's a barbecue show, and briskets. You had mentioned briskets being pretty popular here this summer, of course, especially in the prices of briskets, as you've talked about. So let me ask you, I guess, first of all, can you get briskets at lafrida.com on the home section? And then secondarily, and I can't believe I'm going to ask this question to you, but you're the expert, is there any difference between a left and a right side brisket as far as tenderness is concerned?
Okay, let's handle the second question first.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you: has that been a topic? I've never heard
yes.
that before.
Of course. Yes. I mean, it is. There are.
Terrible. It's the first time I've heard of that.
Yes. I mean, there is staunch people on either side saying the right side is better or the left side is more tender.
I would love to test them and show them two briskets and ask them which one was the left or the right. However, so the only point I could see from that is, are they referring to when an animal sits and it will only sit usually on one side and then raise itself up?
Honestly,
by one side?
I don't know if there has even been that far of a jump down the rabbit hole, other than just saying that somebody said that the left side or the right side was more tender versus the other.
The only difference between the left side of an animal or the right side of beef would be that as the animal sits, they usually sit on one or the other side, and it's not all lefts, it's not all right. So that would debunk that right there. And cutting briskets my entire life, I have never seen a difference between the left or the right as far as consistency of the product, marbling, the two muscle groups that we have in there, the first cut and the second cut, or otherwise known as the nose and the decal of the brisket. I have not ever seen a difference between the left or the right. Now, have I ever tasted them side by side to see if one was more tender? No. But physically, I have never seen a difference. Now, I have seen a difference in the size of cuts that are either from the left or the right, but they have to do with the rear of the animal, because the rear of the animal is what is really taking a break. And if you see animals that are lying down, they're usually either lying completely on their bellies or tilted to one side, but the front is more likely than not still at least half up. The briskets, the two brisket groups, which only represent about 22 or 23 pounds of the animal, hold up 30% of the animal's weight. So there is a significant use for these muscles in the animal. I mean, 30% of the weight is tremendous.
Yeah. Especially
when we're talking about animals over 1,000 pounds. I mean, it's a lot of richness and a lot of strength. And and that's why it's not something that you can just quickly grill like you would grill a steak. That's why it's a slow cooked item. As opposed to something from the back, which is a grilling item. But left or right, no. I would love to see some more evidence. Someone came up with that, and it's a fun topic to talk about. I just have never seen the difference.
So what about briskets for sale at lafrida.com?
Yeah, we offer briskets on lafrida.com and usually trim them. Now, I know that a few months ago when the price got really crazy, we temporarily took them off because we just thought that the price of the brisket was more than it may have cost for the shipping, because shipping overnight is difficult. But it's something that we are putting back on shortly, and you can get that brisket trimmed, or you can get it dropped, and you would get it fresh.
And you can get them in that 16, 18-pound range?
Yes. No, 16 or 18-pound range.
Yeah.
No, they're trimmed a little bit better than that, and they are in the 10 to 12-pound range.
Okay, but whole briskets, point and flat.
Oh yes, definitely whole briskets. So we currently have them available on our site, like I said, and we had only taken them off a couple weeks ago, maybe for like a week, until the prices got a little bit better for our consumers. But they're about 10 to 12 pounds. That's how much a brisket should weigh. When they're in the 15 to 17 pound range, there's either two things have happened to the brisket. One is that it hasn't been trimmed of some of the navel side towards the belly, and another thing is that the fat on the nose is got to be more than an inch thick. Other than that, those really big briskets may come from older animals. And I think we've spoken about this before. An animal that's over 30 months of age, so we're talking about cows, old milking cows, when they're brought out to pasture, they're not even graded by the USDA. That's how bad the quality is. So the marbling is bad. It's over 30 months of age, also subjects consumers to BSE. So mad cow disease has only been found in animals that are over 30 months of age. So we don't handle any product like that. Our beef is in the 24 months of age range, and that's why it's so tender, and that's really the secret to it being sweet and consistent.
Pat LaFrida breaking it all down for us here this evening. You can go to lafrida.com and get your dry-aged steaks, or your not dry-aged steaks if you want. The briskets are up there as well. Again, it's lafrida.com. Pat, always appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
My pleasure, brother. Good speaking to you.
You got it. There he is.
Good night, everyone.
Pat LaFrida right there talking about briskets. And, man, he just talked about mad cow. That was great. My board is disconnected from my laptop. That's great, too. That's fantastic. LaFrida.com, Lafrieda. LaFrida.com, and check out. And those steaks, pretty awesome. The 70-day dry age are back, by the way. They were off for a little bit. All right, Green Mountain Grills. Great pellet cookers. If you're looking for some, get ready. Why not? You have a classic line to choose from. You also have a prime line. The prime is new this year. They have the look-in glasses both on the cooking chamber and on the pellet hopper. They have two internal meat probes. They have the 12-volt power technology, more robust chassis, just a better built overall cooker. Not to say the classic isn't good. That's what you want. I have two. They work really well. Daniel Boone and Jim Bowie are the ones that are going to go in the backyard. Davy Crockett is what you're going to take to your tailgates as they start to approach here shortly. They also have pellets to fire those cookers and a whole bunch of other great stuff. Sauces, rubs, accessories. GreenMountainGrills.com. That's Green Mountain Grills, one of the leading pellet cookers out there today. All right, we are back to wrap the first hour right after this. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Big name interviews, advice on cooking brisket and ribs, and the only host willing to share his honest opinion on all things important in the world of barbecue. It's the Barbecue Central Show.
All right, we thank Pat LaFrida for joining me last segment. This is going to be a quick turnaround. We have Angel Todd coming up here in just a few minutes to talk about the SCA event in Hartville, Ohio that you won a week and a half ago. Again, the website for Pat LaFrida, Lafrieda, Lafrida.com. That's Lafrida.com. Dry-aged steaks, regular, non-dry-aged steaks, prime, not prime, and the briskets. He said 12 to 10 to 12 pounds should be the size you want. Stick around. We'll be right back.